Throughout the Western New York region, you'll find any number of regional off-track betting places that you can go and gamble. Gamble on horse races, gamble on almost anything. Casinos, things like that. The money that is supposedly designated for that area is supposed to come back to the Western New York region, the community that those parlors serve. What does it? We're going to be talking with a reporter who's investigated this on this week's episode of the State of Greater Western New York Report, which, as always, is brought to you by.
Each week, our community makes history. Each week, you make history. And each week, there's only one source to turn to for the first take on history. You know what that is? Subscribe to the Sentinel right now to discover the history being made in your own backyard.
The Mendon Honeylake Falls Lima Sentinel. More than just your news, it's your history. Welcome, everyone, to this edition of the State of Greater Western New York Report. Join us each episode as we discuss fantastic topics ranging from history to science to the strange and the wonderful, as well as the treasured spirit with which our region has infused America. We challenge you to consider all things Greater Western New York, from our region's very beginnings to how it inspires, how it empowers, and why it is so admired. Here's the host of the State of Greater Western New York Report, Chris Carosa.
Hi there, and welcome everyone to this week's edition of the State of Greater Western New York Report. I'm Chris Carosa, and with me today is Mark Scheer. He is a reporter at the Niagara Gazette. Mark, welcome today, and tell us, before we begin in this story, people are always interested in how reporters got to be reporters. Tell us a little bit about your story and how you ended up being a reporter at, well, the Niagara Gazette, as well as a couple other newspapers.
Right. Well, I developed what I would call the illness of a passion for reporting at about 14 years old. My dad is still a voracious Buffalo News reader, and I grew up sitting around the kitchen table reading mostly the sports section with him as early as I can remember as a teenager. I just decided to go to school to become a reporter, and watching your intro, I see the Sentinel, which reminds me a lot of my first newspaper job, which was at the Journal-Register in Medina in Orleans County, which sadly is no longer with us, closed down years ago. But I just lucked out in getting what I would call the right jobs for me. The Journal, and I moved on to the Niagara Gazette and its sister paper, the Lockport Journal in Lockport. And I've been there on and off for about 25 years now.
So tell me, when you go talk to people and you introduce yourself as a reporter, what's the initial reaction that they have? Do they say, "Oh, I shouldn't talk to this person," or do they say, "Really, what kind of inside information do you have that the newspaper can't print?"
It's interesting. It's changed, of course, in recent years, I think. There's sort of a stigma sometimes with some people about reporters. I think with the internet and things like that, just things have changed. But most of the time, I find people are really fascinated by being a reporter. You know, what's the job like? What do you do all day? Where do you get your stories? People ask me that all the time. You know, how do you get a story? So I really enjoy that part of it, like interacting with people. And I find, although everyone says newspapers are dying, which in a lot of ways they are, there's still a lot of people out there who enjoy a good read, an interesting story, a compelling narrative to follow. So for me, again, you know, I don't know what I get. I wanted to cover the New York Yankees when I was 14, and I ended up in a news job, which is a longer story than you have time to tell here, but it's been great. It's been everything I hoped it would be.
Well, so when we talk about getting leads on stories, how did you come upon this story with the OTB audit? Or was the audit something you discovered after you started looking into the story?
Well, we actually, I had a colleague of mine named Phil Gambini. The two of us were covering the departure from public office of a longtime state senator, George Maziarz, who represented Niagara County and Orleans County in the state legislature for decades. And he was involved in an investigation and ultimately decided against running for office again. And his sort of circle of people were also involved in this investigation, and some of them ended up becoming like witnesses for the prosecution, and former Senator Mazier's ended up taking a plea and paying a fine. But long story short, he left office under terms where he had some issues with some of the people he used to work with, and one of those people is now running Western New York Regional Off-Track Betting. His name is Henry Watazik, the former chairman of the Niagara County Republican Party. And the former senator brought out some things about OTB, sort of started down a track of you should really look at what's happening out there, and we started following that track.
So let's start with just defining the lay of the land. Where does Western New York OTB cover? How many different counties, or to what extent are they? Is it focused in regional metropolitan areas, or does it go out into the rural areas? Tell us how much of an extent the Western off-track betting regional
Right.
encompasses.
It's actually both. It has a total of 17 entities that it represents. 15 of them are counties. Many of them are rural counties like Orleans or Genesee. It also represents the two large cities, Rochester and Buffalo. So there's 17 in total covering Western New York, Niagara County included. And each of those entities are represented by a director on the board, and that board is the decision-making body for OTB.
Are these are these offices affiliated or linked to racetracks? Because there's a number of racetracks in Western New York, or do they really cover more than just racetrack or horse racing?
It was primarily horse racing, obviously, when it started, I believe, in the 70s. And of course, horse racing is not what it used to be anymore. So the big ticket item for OTB right now, the big draw, is Batavia Downs, which is a horse racing track and a casino in Batavia in Genesee County. That is the largest entity that OTB runs right now. And they also continue to have betting parlors where you can go, for example, in Niagara Falls and place a bet on horse races. And they have easy bet locations, which are similar, but in like local bars and restaurants and that sort of thing. And those are sort of all across Western New York in these service areas, Buffalo, Rochester, and the various counties.
Now, when the theory is, at least, explain how the money flows. So you go to your local OTB betting parlor and you make some bets, and it makes some money off of your bets or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Where's that money supposed to go? How is it supposed to be used?
Well, of course, part of it, they need to use it to keep the places open, right? I mean, you have to have money to run the betting parlors and employ people. You have to have money to run OTB and keep the casino running. So what they take in, they use to keep the operations going. And there's a certain percentage that goes back to the state of New York because it's a state-sanctioned entity. And then there's another percentage that goes back, and it's split among the participating entities, the counties and the cities. OTB will tell you they're doing record numbers this past year, this current year, in terms of return to the host communities.
Now, let's go back to the story itself. So you sort of got tipped up to do some research. You worked with another media company to do
Mm-hmm.
this, right? So tell us a little bit about that. How did you get started? Where did the lead bring you first?
The biggest thing, the other media company, by the way, is an independent nonprofit news organization, excuse me, called Investigative Post. It's located in Buffalo, and it's run by Jim Heaney, former award-winning, he's still award-winning, but he's a former Buffalo news reporter. And I actually worked there up until earlier this year. I came back to the Niagara Gazette for personal reasons, but we established a relationship between the papers and Mr. Heaney's outlet, and sort of jointly started digging into the biggest thing were these tickets. OTB purchases for promotional reasons tickets to sporting events and concerts. The big ones being the Buffalo Bills games. They have a suite at the stadium in Orchard Park. They have a suite at the arena in downtown Buffalo for the Buffalo Sabres. And the tickets are supposed to go to gamblers, to get them to come back to use Batavia Downs, for example. And what we were told and what we looked into was the use of the tickets by OTB officials, including the board directors, family members, friends, that sort of thing. And in 2019, the state controller's office came in and corroborated that was indeed happening.
So you broke this news before the auditors did, right?
We started on the path of looking into, there were some other things, like the board members they're part-time board members. They meet twice a month. So they have committee meetings one day and then they have a full board meeting the next day. They were receiving full-time health insurance benefits for that duty. So that was another sort of piece of it. Those two things, the tickets and the health insurance, which we started to Go ahead.
Did you work with the auditors? Did the auditors kind of
No.
look at what you were doing, or they were totally separate from what you did?
I mean, it's hard to say. There were stories about this practice, and then there was an audit. I believe someone, maybe within the board, one of the board members called for the audit, as I recall. It's been a while now, but there are a couple board members. There was one guy, he's no longer on the board now, but he didn't like what he was seeing, and I believe he reached out to the authorities. And then when the audit came out, of course, we followed up on the audit, and excuse me,
Tell us about that. Tell us about when the audit came out and you saw that they essentially confirmed what you were looking into. What happened next? What did you learn, or what did you do next?
Well, I still think this is
Go ahead. Sorry.
I still think this is a super interesting thing. I mean, you have people who are board members. You have people who are upper management of a public entity. I mean, this is important. It's public. And they were taking, according to the controller's audit, which looks at a window of time, right? It's not the totality of operations. It's just like a couple years that they look at. They found $120,000 worth of tickets were used improperly. And they found that those tickets were given to board directors and friends and family, that sort of thing. And that really is the thing that sort of drove a lot of the interest in the reporting. Then we did stories about, we did freedom of information requests and obtained information about the expenditures on top of the tickets. So when you go to a football game, there's eating, there's drinking. It's not inexpensive to buy a pizza at a suite at the stadium in Orchard Park. So we looked at all those things and found the higher ups at OTB were using these things for themselves, and they were being distributed to gamblers, right? It's not like every ticket was misused or improperly used, but some of them certainly went to people who are affiliated with management at OTB.
All right. So when we come back, we're going to ask Mark about when they found out this information. What happened when he followed up directly with officials and essentially confronted them with the idea that this is going on? What kind of response did he get? And this is an ongoing story, so it's not going to be complete, but we'll see what happens when we come back.
Through the mists of time, nature and man have both created and buried treasures beyond the imagination. With the ages, these riches slowly dissolve into mere myths until they are forever forgotten. But there are those brave souls who tirelessly cling to the truth, ever seeking to discover the undiscovered, to reveal what has always been there, to uncover the hidden gems of a land thought forsaken but loved by millions. 50 Hidden Gems of Greater Western New York. Discover the secrets in your own backyard. Buy your copy now at 50hiddengems.com.
Well, welcome back to this week's episode of the State of Greater Western New York Report. Again, we've got Mark Scheer. He is talking to us about a little bit of something going on, maybe at the OTB regional offices in the Western New York region at least. Mark, we did have a question come in, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but was there anything outside of the Western New York region with regard to some of these things going on? Were you aware of other regional OTB offices doing the same thing, or you haven't found out yet?
We had some discussion with people from other parts of the state where there were some things going on with off-track betting, but not to my recollection. I don't really remember where this was done at the other places. It may have been. I don't, we were approached by some people at other locations about things going on with OTBs, but it's kind of out of our purview. I mean, we're Western New York based, so we are mostly focused on what's happening here.
Right. Well, if for those in the live audience, if you have a question you want me to ask Mark, just put it in the chat, and I'll ask it just like I did there. So, Mark, you find this information out. You see that there's some irregularities in the use of these tickets and other affiliated sort of expenditures. You report this, obviously, in the newspaper. You write a story, but then do you go ahead and now report this to somebody higher up in New York State, or do you try to get more information? And what happens when you did that?
Well, I'm a firm believer that you do the reporting, and then hopefully the powers that be follow up and do what they're supposed to do. I believe the controller's office got involved because the reporting showed or suggested some irregularities. Since then, there's been policies that have been changed by OTB as a result of this. They now, in the past, they would allow multiple officials from OTB to go to the suites as hosts for games, and now they've changed the policy. Now there's just one host, so only one OTB official. Someone is in the suite to help people who receive tickets, make sure they're doing okay, finding their way around, that sort of thing. But in the past, they had multiple people doing that. Now it's just one. So that's one change. The health insurance situation, which was, free health insurance, not free, but in exchange for the duties on the board, that has been changed so that the incoming board members will not receive that perk. So things have happened, I think, sort of out of highlighting it, and then the controller's office coming in and saying, this is best practice. You should do these things, not these things. So there have been changes just that way. There's more to the story. It's still going on, and in fact, in May, Democrats in the state legislature, as part of the new state budget, implemented some reform measures, which included, first and foremost, the removal of all the old board directors.
So if you talk to OTB about it, did OTB ever admit that they did something wrong, or did they just sort of like softly change the policies so that it wouldn't happen again?
I have to say that Henry Watazik, who's the CEO, has acknowledged. He always says that there were some improper things that happened, and their take now is that, as I said, they've addressed the use of the tickets and the health insurance through policy changes. So on that front, there has been some movement. I have to say it's not always been easy getting information. They're not exactly. I'm not their favorite person, but that's how the process goes. That's that comes with the territory, doing the job.
So you mentioned earlier that the Democrats in the state legislature removed all the directors. Is this by singling out the Democrats? Does this imply that there might be some sort of partisanism in what's going on over and above inappropriate behavior?
Well, I've been around a long time, and politics is always politics, and it's always involved on some level. And I think it is involved on some level here because Mr. Witazik's a former chairman of the GOP in Niagara County. A lot of the supporters he has are Republicans. The Democrats saw this, I think, as an opportunity to score some points on reforming something that had some issues that were pointed out by the auditor. So there's politics involved on that front. I mean, the next frontier here right now, what we're in, many of the counties just reappointed their board members. So the people that were removed were put back on. But some of the communities, I believe, including Monroe County, changed their board members or are, but those board members have not been approved by the State Gaming Commission. So since roughly June, the board hasn't been able to meet and actually conduct business because they don't have a quorum to conduct business. But I can add the biggest thing that happened 5 days after the removal of the former board, the 5 days before the former board was removed, the board members agreed to give contracts, multi-year contracts to 18 executives, including the CEO, whose contract pays him $70,000 more per year for a salary of $272,000, which is more than the governor and more than the vice president of the United States.
Well, I guess you could make the case that maybe OTB brings in more money than the other two, but just a joke. So,
well, they always say, he had what was the joke? He had a better year than I did. I don't know. It's an old baseball thing.
Right.
He had a better year
the Babe Ruth story. Yeah, it's a Babe Ruth story.
Right. He makes more than you, Mr. President. What'd you think? Well, he had a better year than I did.
So they haven't had a meeting since May. What happens if there's no meeting? I mean,
It's an interesting question.
Do they? I guess what I'm wondering is, first of all, the new director, the ones that have been reappointed, even though they might be the same directors, they're waiting for approval from the state. So the first question is, why do you think the state hasn't approved these appointments yet?
That is an interesting question, and one, honestly, I'm looking into as we speak. It's been months. I would imagine some sort of process to make sure that people who are serving on a public body that involves gambling, they have a background check system and that sort of thing. I'm trying to figure out if some of the board members who were newly brought in like a couple months ago were already approved and when they were approved and how long that took. I can tell you that the new members from Buffalo and Erie County, which are Democratic strongholds and places where Democrats would put they're the ones doing the appointing. Those people have not been approved since roughly June, I guess, or whenever they were first appointed. So it's taken at least a month or so, a couple months maybe. So it's an interesting question. The State Gaming Commission regulates all this. I've reached out to them and asked them these questions. They don't answer. I have to probably file a Freedom of Information request and figure out what's going on because the information officer there just ignores me.
So they get appointed, but they can't serve, right? They're not serving. So they
Correct.
don't have any of the benefits of that appointment. And
until they're confirmed, they can't take action. So
Right.
it's sort of a limbo.
so and these appointments are both Republicans and Democrats, right?
Correct. Yep.
So it's probably not. It may not be partisan so much. Very interesting. I mean, I'd be curious to see why the delay. I mean, is this a normal delay? Do they normally have this sort of period of time between the actual appointment by or application, whatever it is you call it, by the county and the formal approval by the state?
Yeah, that's a good question because it's not really something we've experienced, right? You had these 17 board members and you're getting health insurance. You're getting, maybe tickets and perks like that. These people stayed in their positions until they were removed. So we've never really experienced too often, I mean, at least I haven't, where a board member leaves and someone new comes in and they have to be approved. Certainly not a wholesale change, all 17 of them. And, keep in mind the people that were brought back, a lot of the rural counties just put their person back. That process may be different because they already were approved once, right? So maybe they don't need to go through that same sort of scrutiny. Genesee County had its representative retire, and that they were replaced by a retired judge. That person was replaced by a retired judge. I don't know his status. I don't know if he's approved yet by the Gaming Commission. I'm very interested in that because it would be interesting, I think, if his approval went quickly and the other approvals are taking months. Again, one of the fascinating things is you have a gaming commission with a press person that you ask questions of, and they just ignore you. At one point, I asked some questions a while back of the same guy, and he told me to stop bothering him with this. And I wrote that in the paper because again, you talk about government, right? This is job is to be bothered by guys like me. So
Right.
we keep asking. That's how that's how it goes.
So the directors that took advantage of these games, going to these games, were they all the directors, or were they just directors in certain areas? I'm wondering, like the rural directors that live far away from these stadiums, did they come and do it? They did?
Well, there were other things, there were concert tickets, Darien
Oh,
Lake. I don't know if you're familiar with Darien Lake.
oh yeah,
I
yeah.
believe the Rochester Amerks games.
Mhm.
We were told of stories where directors received up to 8 tickets or so for grandchildren and things of that nature. I'm super interested in all that because, to my knowledge, no one's reimbursed anybody for any of that. So $120,000 worth of tickets used, as they would say, improperly. And I guess the public just pays for that. And there you go. I've asked Mr. Watazik actually not too long ago, when will the reimbursement happen?
The audit said these were illegal transactions, right?
Well, again, OTB will tell you it's improper. That's the word they like to use.
Well, I know
but
that's what I was going to get to. OTB defines it as improper, but the audit,
yeah,
did the audit actually say they were illegal?
it was inappropriate. I mean, I
Okay,
guess I would put it
okay.
that way. Basically, the state auditors determined these tickets should go to people who gamble, say at Batavia Downs. The idea is you're buying them. It's very expensive to go to a Bills game and sit in a suite and have a pizza and a beer. It's not
Mhm.
cheap. We were very interested in public officials who may have attended these games. Aside from board directors, county legislators or people of that nature, did they go? Their spouses, their children, their families, who went? We actually had to sue to get that information, and we successfully sued and obtained information about the tickets. But it was difficult to figure out, who went, how it all went down. I can tell you with certainty that some members of the Niagara County Legislature went to these games. And did they pay for their tickets? Still kind of up in the air. Still an open question.
Well, we'll look forward to more reporting on this. Mark, where can people read these stories?
They can find, I write about it quite a bit still at the Niagara Gazette. So they can check out the Niagara Gazette's website. Our sister newspaper is the Lockport Union Sun and Journal in Lockport. We actually have 2 papers in Niagara County alive and basically well, so that's good news. And also Investigative Post, which is a Buffalo-based independent news outlet. As I mentioned, you can find us all online and on Facebook, and we appreciate all the support we can get.
All right. Mark, thanks for being here. Audience, thank you for being at today's show and asking any questions you might have had. If you want to be a member of the live audience, go to stateof.greaterwesternewyork.com, which you can see right here, and just sign up. It's free, and every Thursday morning you'll get the secret private link that'll allow you to become a member of the live studio audience, and that's the only way you'll be able to ask questions. Now, I realize people work, so you can't really see it live or watch it live because it's at noon every Thursday. Well, I tell you what, you can go to the same site, stateofgreaterwestnewyork.com, stateof.greaterwestnewyork.com, and just go into the site and you can see which category it is and you can watch it for free on the archives. If you like our Facebook page or if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, this show is rebroadcast every Sunday at 1:30 on those platforms. And when it is rebroadcast, like I say, if you like the page or subscribe to the channel, those platforms will notify you that it's being rebroadcast. So that's all we have for this week. We'll see you all next week, and thanks again. Bye bye for now.